This episode was brought to you by Awesome, AWSM. Awesome is a platform that makes it super easy for companies to give ownership to the people who are creating value for them. It's like Venmo and Stripe, but for equity. Brands can easily share ownership with their agency partners, their influencers and brand ambassadors, their fans and customers, and their employees. Learn more at awesome.com, AWSM.com. Okay, today I have Zach Olson on the podcast with me, and this is going to be a really cool story because Zach is a master of multiple trades, and his story is really fascinating. So I'm really excited to get to this and to have you tell the story. But he is the founder and CEO of an app or company, but an app kind of based on, it's called Treads.
Yeah.
And is it Treads.app?
Yeah, Treads.app.
Okay, that's the website, and then you can find the app in like Google and Apple and
okay, all the app stores.
All the app stores. Okay, so Treads app. But I want to go back in history before we kind of end up on the Treads thing. We were talking about this a little bit outside, but your entrepreneurial story starts in St. George, Utah, at a skate shop, right?
Yep.
This is so cool. So start there. Or if you want to go back, I mean, we can go back to Paper Route. We could go back to the lemonade stands.
that might
it was too much.
Might be too much.
Yeah, too long.
PTSD. I mean, but yeah, we can hop in the DeLorean and backtrack.
Go back in time. Okay, so yeah, maybe start with like the skate shop in St. George.
Yeah, I mean, in many ways, skateboarding saved my life, right? Like it just put me on a track of entrepreneurship for whatever reason. I don't know exactly why, but so this was like 2005, 2006, kind of the era. So I was dating my now wife at the time, and I was just like, the one thing I've always loved in life is skateboarding. And I knew pretty early on.
When did you start skateboarding?
Oh, geez. I mean, I was probably like 12.
Okay.
12, 13 is when I got my first board.
And Tony Hawk was your guy.
Tony Hawk. Actually, a cool Tony Hawk story is this last Christmas party we had at Treads. Our team surprised me with, cameo.
Oh, yeah.
Tony Hawk did a cameo.
No way.
Yeah, for me and Treads. So,
that's so cool.
Yeah, it was really
For
awesome.
those listeners who don't know, Cameo is an app, just really quick, we're not sponsored, but it's a cool little sidebar of an app that lets you get like celebrities, famous athletes, like politicians, whatever, and they get paid a pretty hefty sum for the amount of time that they put in, but they'll do like a little 30-second, 1 minute kind of shout out or like, hey, how you doing or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool. So Tony Hawk gives you this little...
Yeah, so that's my connection.
Nice.
I mean, pretty
You guys
far.
are tight now.
Yeah. We're like, homies.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, with skateboarding, it was just like early on, I started early, I just got into it, and, I quickly learned probably by like 17, 18, like I had dislocated my hip, I had broken an ankle, and I was like, just kind of, I would say, okay, mediocre. I started getting like free.
Did you try to compete?
Yeah, okay. Totally. That was the path I was on.
Okay.
I started getting like, I was sponsored by a skate shop, started getting free product, free shoes, and then I started getting hurt, and then broke an ankle, dislocated the hip, and I was like, I'm probably not going pro at this, which, so the next best thing was starting a business, kind of labor of love, and that was the whole origin of the skate shop was all of that. So this was like true baptism by fire into starting.
You'd already suffered a lot of physical pain. So you're like, what's the next most logical thing? The pain of starting a business.
How can I continue the pain?
Yes, I'm good at suffering. So let's lean into that.
Yeah. And dude, it was painful for sure. Retail is no joke. Like quickly learned if you're not open, you're not making money.
Yeah.
And that was tough. So it was just like we were constantly open.
How did you get your first like location?
Man. So, I mean, being in a smaller town, it was like you're always just looking for, okay, what's prime real estate? How close are we to the skate park? All of those things. So we found a pretty, I don't know, centralized location, it felt like, in the town we were at. So yeah, got the initial lease secured, and then I put everything I had and every penny I had into this business. And
you had to have a bunch of inventory.
oh, man.
This is old school storefront retail.
Yeah. I mean, it's like if your store's empty, you have nothing to sell, you're not going to make money.
Yeah.
And you wanted to come out, I don't know, at least for me, I wanted to come out swinging hard, right? Like we're a legit store.
Yeah.
So give ourselves some street cred.
Yeah.
So, so started that was like 2005-ish. And we just, me and my girlfriend at the time were just heads down, just working this business. And
did the two of you man the store? Like open to close?
Open to close.
6 days, 7 days? Like how many days a week?
We started at 6 and then went to 7 and then went back to 6.
It's like, I need a break.
Yeah. It was just like, how do you avoid burnout? And I think in any early stage business, like, I mean, you live, breathe, and eat the business.
Yeah.
So that's
was
what we were
just the two of you in the beginning?
Yeah.
So at what point did you start hiring any employees?
We actually never did.
You never did?
Never did.
You guys manned it 6 days and sometimes 7 days a week?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So we started like 2005, and then the tough part is like 2008 hit, like the recession, right? And man, that was rough because you could just see everything in the economy was just kind of imploding, and you could see the writing on the wall where it was just like, okay, and then we saw, obviously all the domino effects hit where it was just like, okay, we've got to figure out what's next, and, we still continued running the business, running the skate shop. And we just got to that tipping point of like, okay, we can live and die doing this, or we can figure out what's the next best thing. And coming out of the skate shop was quickly learning that nobody starts a business to try and become an accountant or a bookkeeper.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so this was like, I don't know, 2000.
Because you guys had to do that on top of like selling all the stuff and buying all the stuff and doing all the store things. You also had to do all the accounting.
You wore
taxes.
Yeah, exactly. So it was just like, in hindsight, the skate shop was like an MBA in business. Right?
Wow.
You learn everything.
Yeah.
Sometimes the hard way, sometimes the easy way. But I look back at it like with nothing but fondness, even though there was a lot of ups, downs, whatever.
What was your favorite thing about the store?
Man, the coolest part, and this is kind of skateboard culture. Most skate shops have like a team that they sponsor, like local skateboarders, where it's like they get a discount, or you just hook them up on product.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like your street team, guerrilla marketing, right? The coolest aspect was we were able to sponsor like a pretty decent sized team. We even had a professional skateboarder.
Wow. Were they all from St. George?
All the kids were. Our pro skateboarder, James Adkin, good friend of mine. Shout out to James.
Hey, James.
He was a pro from St. George, moved to California, went pro, but still had his roots.
Okay, so he had ties to St. George because he's from there, family maybe, but moved to California. So he was legit. Like he was hitting the big time.
Legit.
Okay.
Yeah, in the magazines, all that. So anyway, so that was one of the fondest memories was, not only building a team, but just knowing how influential skateboarding was to me as a kid, being able to kind of see what kind of positive impact our little store could have on these future shredders. So that was big takeaway was that experience.
Nice.
Yeah.
What was the worst part of it?
Ooh, having to close it.
Yeah.
Closing the business. I think
so. Even through all of the grind, that you became emotionally attached enough to it that it was really hard to close it down.
Yeah.
It wasn't like, oh, this is a huge relief. I'm so glad to.
Well, don't get me wrong. There was relief in it.
Oh,
Too,
okay.
but definitely, my wife and I always talk about it. Like, I mean, there's always those memories of like, whenever you go into a store, it's like, oh, if we could redo the shop, we'd maybe
do this thing. Yeah.
So
Okay.
a lot of fun things like that. But
okay, so when did you shut it down?
So it was probably like 2009, 10.
Okay.
And around that same time, this was kind of like the next big thing was like cloud computing was just like coming online.
Yeah.
Like AWS.
Yep.
And this was even before QuickBooks Online.
Wow.
Like,
okay.
And, prior to...
SaaS was just becoming a thing.
Just barely.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was just like coming around, which is really cool to see. I was starting to notice a lot of different tech companies popping up because of this. Before the skate shop, I actually did sales for an accounting firm. I'm not an accountant, not a CPA, nothing like that, but I knew how to sell accounting services.
Yeah.
So this was like, as you can see all this coming together, but I was thinking, okay, coming out of the skate shop, what's the one big problem I would like to solve for me, the skate shop owner? And it was accounting. So, and again, cloud accounting, all of this was just spinning up. So I started working on this idea in my mind of, wow, what if we could like leverage cloud technology and simplify accounting for small business? Like, how do we make that easier so it's not a stress or a worry?
Yeah.
And that was kind of the beginning point of Bookly, my next company. So
it's so crazy, but it makes sense.
Yeah.
That, you had felt the pain firsthand.
Yeah.
And there's a part of me that's like, wait a minute, how did you end up selling accounting software? You're the skater. And I mean, did they make you cut your hair and like wear a nice shirt? Or you're like, no, just you're rolling in like, hey, I'm a skater, but you want some accounting software? And they're like, yeah, sure. That's cool.
The length of my hair has gone up and down.
Okay. So you had both this experience of like, I know how to pitch the value props to the buyer.
Yeah.
I've experienced the pain firsthand as a business owner. So then you started thinking, now with this cool advent, and it's funny for us to talk about that like it was like 100 years ago when it, but it feels like so long ago when SaaS was like just becoming a thing, cloud computing was just becoming a thing. But there's this opportunity for you to say, hey, what if we could build a cloud-based accounting platform for small and medium-sized businesses? And you knew the pain firsthand.
Yeah.
But I want to know what the mental shift was. Did you want to become a software guy? I mean, were there moments when you were like running a store and you're like, man, the software guys have it so good because I'm here from sun up till sundown. I got to like sell everything one by one by one. Yeah. If I made some software and I could just sell it and like have that like recurring revenue, that would be pretty sweet. I mean, was that kind of your...
So many like learnings, right? Coming out of the skate shop. And, that was definitely a big one where I quickly realized, again, if you're not open, you're not making money. And that business model, again, labor of love, wouldn't change a thing.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to running a business, like that's not super scalable.
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, I can't clone myself.
Yeah.
So let's rethink the type of business. And that's where it got exciting of, okay, seeing cloud tech come online. And then it was just like your audience just, was insanely massive at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just all about distribution. So that was a big paradigm shift for me thinking about business was like, okay, I don't have to be there, literally at a register.
Mm-hmm.
And like my geo, just like the walls fell off.
Mm-hmm.
So that was like the big moment.
Okay, I could sell this. I mean, at least within the United States.
Yeah,
I could sell this anywhere,
totally.
Not just St. George and the surrounding city or villages.
Area, yeah.
Yes, surrounding area. Well, so the other thought that I had, or question I had, is you shut down the store, probably didn't have a pile of cash. Was there a part of you that's like, maybe I should just go get a job?
Which I did for a while.
Okay.
Yeah. There was definitely that buffer period, and I didn't have a pile of cash, but I had a pile of skateboards and clothes and shoes.
Yeah.
And,
did you keep selling that? Like online, or that was kind of a new sort of thing.
Like
right?
eBay, right?
Yeah.
Like, we would sell stuff here and there, but we actually just ended up donating all the old inventory to organization, like a DI kind of organization, right?
Yeah.
We just gave it to them.
Wow.
So
Okay.
figured they could do good with it.
Yeah.
So
okay, but then did you think, okay, I've got to temporarily get a job, but I really want to keep being an entrepreneur? Or did you go get a job and then were pulled back to entrepreneurship? Like, where was your mindset around the entrepreneur thing? Like, were you burned out for a minute of being an entrepreneur? You're like, no, I want to get right back into it. I just need a little bit of stability while I think of my next idea.
Yeah, I think it was more, so I went from the skate shop back into accounting sales for a period, and it helped me continue to validate.
At the same company?
No, different company.
Okay.
Yeah. Continued to validate it. Actually ended up setting up our own accounting firm. So we spun up another company in accounting specifically.
Okay.
So ran that for a few years, had a few partners, and then, continued to validate what I wanted to do next, and sold my ownership in that company back to the other partners. And then it was a full shift to accounting tech.
Okay.
And building out this software.
Okay.
So, and shortly after starting that company, we realized, okay, for us to really build this thing out, we need to be in Salt Lake. So hiring tech talent in a small town, super difficult, especially when it's like a retirement community,
Yeah.
So me and my wife came up here. My son, who's now 11, was like 6 months old.
Wow.
So super crazy. So we came up here and just started building the company and got introduced to the kind of venture community in Salt Lake, and I'd never raised venture capital.
Yeah.
Right. So this was like a whole nother mind-blowing piece of the journey.
Yeah.
So
how did you start building it, and how did you start doing that first kind of product validation? We talk about it now like product market fit, but back then that wasn't even really a common topic that people talked about that much. There were a couple of startup incubators that were just starting to get going. The lean startup movement was not quite even a thing yet. Like maybe just starting to kind of be, so it's like early.
Yeah.
Like the infrastructure for entrepreneurs, tech entrepreneurs, was just starting to kind of become a thing. Silicon Slopes was just becoming a thing.
Totally.
So how did you think about that, and how did you start building and validating the idea?
It was such a crazy process, because it was before a lot of what we have now was around. But so my first step was just like, okay, let's see if small businesses feel the same way that I felt, and like nobody in accounting was selling subscription packages back then.
It's just like buy it and download it or something, right?
Yeah. Or they would go to like a local accountant, right? The local accountant would bill them by the hour.
Okay. Just professional services, like just do my stuff for them.
Exactly. So what the whole concept was how do we create a software-enabled service? So how do we take technology, but give businesses the peace of mind there's actually a professional accountant behind the scenes, making sure taxes are filed, all that.
Someone they can talk to, ask questions.
Ask all the questions.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the framework, but instead of billing by the hour, could we just set up subscription tiers? Like, I think we started at like $49 a month, and then it was like $99 a month, and just kind of went up based on what you added. But it was software and an accountant bundled. So that was kind of like first, kind of subscription type service in the accounting space. And this was, 2013, about 2013.
Okay.
So,
and this is called Bookly.
Bookly.
Is it like book.ly, or was it Bookly dot something?
Bookly.co
Okay.
is what it was.
Okay.
Yeah. But we originally started as Tax Ally, but we started getting a lot of grief about the name.
Mm-hmm.
Like people would call it Tax Alley because it was ALLI.
Mm-hmm.
We were trying to play cool on the name.
Yeah.
But so we ended up rebranding about a year into the company to Bookly.
Okay. So did you kind of validated the idea, you felt like people need this. How did you start coding? I mean, did you start coding it yourself?
So I'm a non-technical founder.
Okay.
And I'm not an accountant or a CPA, right? So it's like kind of, okay, what's this guy doing starting an accounting tech company? So I ended up teaming up with a really great dev shop out of, at the time they were based in New York City.
Wow.
So
how'd you find them? Just online?
Just hustling. Yeah, just trying to connect and network with other people and got connected with them. And they turned out to be an awesome, just small team. And they built out the MVP for us.
But did you have cash or did you say, hey, I'll give you a chunk of equity? Like, how did you do that?
So my wife and I self-funded the company for like the first year.
Wow.
And then we came up here to Salt Lake and then got introed to like the venture community. So Kickstart Seed Funds, Park City Angels, Royal Street Ventures, all of the local funds, right?
Yeah.
And Kickstart, I met with them, and I mean, they cut me a deal like right there on the first meeting, and it all.
Kickstart's also an investor in Awesome. I should say, shout out to Kickstart. They're awesome investors. We love Kickstart. So
I agree.
That's so cool. Okay, so they invested.
Yeah,
and then gave you some more capital. So had you been paying the devs just cash, or did they take some equity as well?
All cash.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you owned 100% until you kind of took your first investment with Kickstart.
Yeah.
And once you had Kickstart in, did other investors jump in, or was it just Kickstart at that point?
Initially, it was Kickstart, Royal Street, and the Park City Angels all participated in that first round.
Okay.
And then we ended up raising a subsequent seed round after that. And then 5 Elms Capital came in and they ended up leading that round, and Kickstart and everybody else followed on. So, yeah.
Nice.
And we just kept going.
Kept on going. So what were your first customers? I mean, I'm assuming small and medium-sized businesses.
Absolutely.
But like of all types, or did you have kind of a niche like skate shops?
I mean,
skate shops.
That was like my ideal customer, right? I think we ended up with 1 or 2 skate shops, and I was always ecstatic about those. But yeah, it was everything.
You gave them like the friends and family discount, right?
I always had the hookup.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was everything from, kind of service-oriented business, plumbers, HVACs, groomers, gyms, you name it. We had them as a customer, cannabis dispensaries. It was kind of crazy just how our customer base grew.
Yeah.
So
with the common thread that they have something that they're super focused on, whether it's a service or a good or whatever, they're really good at that thing. But like you said earlier, like nobody's really good at accounting, and they kind of don't want to worry about it, although they do care about it. So they need to have a high level of trust that it's being done correctly. So this combination of tech and services was probably a great combo, right?
Yeah, totally. And yeah, I mean, I felt like, I love antiquated industries, candidly. And it's just like they just get forgotten because of whatever it is with the incumbents, right, in the space, whether it's just they're not forward thinking or it doesn't make sense for them to rock the boat.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. They've been doing it a certain way.
Yeah.
And they've been making money doing it that way. And it's great because they get a little sleepy.
Yep.
Right? Yeah.
Totally.
And then you can come in and kind of shake things up.
Shake it up.
That's nice. Okay. So how long did you run Bookly?
Yeah. So we started Bookly in 2013. And then fast forward to 2018, we got acquired by KPMG.
Wow.
So, big,
massive. Yeah, massive. Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're a billionaire now.
Oh, man. Well,
I'm sure it was a good,
it was a great outcome.
It was a great outcome for everybody. That's super cool. Did you struggle with and were there multiple opportunities to sell before then? Like what was your mindset around knowing when it was the right time to sell, if you wanted to sell? Walk us through that kind of process.
I think the dream for most startups, there's always there's a level of a fairy tale, right? Like you kind of imagine yourself, at least for me, it was like, how do we attach ourselves to a rocket ship and just really scale and meet the full potential of this company?
Yeah.
So that was always kind of the vision for me, is like, how could we do that, reach as many small businesses as possible, as quickly as possible? Because you can stay on, kind of the fundraising, treadmill and build and grow a company and do it quickly for sure. Or it's like there's this book called Smart Cuts, which is really interesting if you haven't read it. But it's trying to find in like Mario, right? Like you could always find like the secret pathways to skip or warp to the next levels. That was kind of like the frame that I had, is like, how do we skip some levels here and just scale this?
Yeah.
So that was the hope and dream, and it thankfully ended up happening. But we definitely, along our journey, like a few years in, we had potential acquirers actually proactively reach out to us. We dove into those conversations, and we had some of those scenarios just fall apart mid-deal too.
Wow.
So it was just like,
we kind of get your hopes up, and then you're like, it happens multiple times.
Yeah, a couple times we went through that dance, and then at the end we had multiple potential acquirers, and then we ended up choosing KPMG.
Wow.
So.
And then the golden handcuffs.
Man.
I'm assuming you had to stick around for a while.
Yeah.
There was an earn out for a certain period of time. So what did that look like? How long did you stay there? And
yeah, thankfully KPMG was really cool when we were collaborating the deal. We didn't really have golden handcuffs, but we had incentives, to hang out, me and the whole team, which was great. And it was a great opportunity too, because once we went through the integration and kind of handed the baton, of the company, we had an opportunity to shift over to, it was called enterprise innovation, which is like their kind of the closest thing to the startup innovation of a giant firm like KPMG. And that was an amazing opportunity to work with really cool people, and even had a chance to help them spin up kind of the framework of their startup incubator, like a startup studio where they could take internal ideas, start to validate them, and then spin them out.
That's really cool. So then you were involved in that?
Yeah, in the early days, and since then they've spun out, I think, a few ideas, which is cool.
Nice.
So, but throughout that process, it was kind of, I think, revalidating to me that I'm a builder.
Yeah.
I want to go build something. So it was kind of like the beginning of my transition into starting my next company.
Yeah. So did you have a notebook full of ideas at this point, or did you have one particular idea that you were super excited about? How did that, was your mindset like that as you were starting to think about leaving KPMG?
I mean, there's always a million thoughts flying through your head, I think, in any transition, in career. And I think at that point, so my wife, I don't know, maybe a few years before, she is a great supporter in my crazy ideas, and she spins up a lot of good ideas herself. So she bought me a little black book, and that's just where I write down all the crazy ideas. And anyway, but Treads was not in the book at that time.
Okay. There was a lot of other ideas.
There was other stuff.
Okay.
Yeah. But I think the genesis of Treads was, it's kind of a company I've been building in the back of my mind for basically every time I have to go maintain, do some kind of service on my car, my wife's car, and I find myself sitting in a waiting room.
Yeah.
And I was just like,
what am I doing?
yeah.
Yeah.
Like, or I'm like hitting up a friend, like, hey, can you drive me back to the office? Something like that. Like we've all experienced that.
Yeah.
Or now we can catch an Uber,
Yeah. But then you got to pay more money and
exactly. So that was kind of the genesis. And then, COVID, the pandemic hit. And then it's just like, I started reading this other book called Subscribed, and I love reoccurring, revenue business models. So that was kind of like the genesis for me. That's the framework of like, what business can we wrap around a subscription model?
Yeah.
And started just kind of picking apart ideas. And, really from there, it was just like with the pandemic, I quickly started seeing these shifting trends. Like first was car manufacturers were introducing subscriptions for a car. Volvo, Porsche, Ford, all of them started doing it. And then
some of them kind of annoying. Like if you want heated seats, you gotta pay extra subscription. Like for every time you want to turn on your heated seats. I was like, come on, guys, that's a little ridiculous. But
yeah. I think they backtracked that maybe.
I think there was definitely a big backlash. But yeah, well, I mean, but I think the future. I think that model is. It's going to become more and more of that, right?
Absolutely.
They'll sell the base model of the car, and then everything else, instead of a one-time upgrade, is going to be like subscriptions to stuff, right?
Dude, totally. Like the inside of a vehicle, the potential commerce that can happen there is pretty exciting.
Yeah.
So anyway, all these kind of stars started aligning, and then I just...
How long from the time that you kind of like exited KPMG until like the Treads idea started to really percolate? Was that pretty fast, or was it like you thought about it and worked on it and did homework for like a year? What was that like?
I think it's like whenever I look at a company, like I try and kill it before I do anything.
That's actually a brilliant way to approach it, because otherwise we get drunk on the Kool-Aid, right? Totally. We think like, oh, this is such a great idea. Everyone's going to want it.
Yeah.
So part of this product market fit or product validation is like, I'm going to try and find every possible way to destroy this thing, or that the reason why this wouldn't work. Yeah.
And
so what were you specifically doing in this area to like figure out like, would this work or not?
Yeah.
Or why wouldn't it work maybe?
So one of the biggest things that I know that I was trying to get as much validation outside of myself that I could. So I actually ended up hiring a research agency.
Wow.
Like a small startup themselves. They had done work for like Stanford and a bunch of other cool startups. It's called People.fish. So I ended up hiring them, and they did some quick market research, put together a huge survey. And I think we hit up like over 1,000 consumers. And, through that research, it was like probably the quickest way to do like consumer validation to the idea. And it was just like, okay, it's obvious that I'm not the only one who's willing to pay a subscription for car maintenance. And that was kind of a big tipping point. And yeah, I mean, really from there, it was then looking in, really digging into the market research. Like nobody in the US had successfully launched a tire subscription. But the biggest validation for me was actually a few years prior in 2018, tire subscriptions have been going in Europe.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
Surprising.
Okay.
Because most people, I think, especially in the US, are like, we're the first ones to do everything, right?
Yeah.
So I was just like, wow. And then I was able to see some of their...
Ironically, it's just because we live in a bubble and we think we're the first, but like lots of crazy ideas originate in Asia way before here.
Right?
Some in Europe way before here.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's funny.
So kind of all of those things started piling up, and I just could not shake the idea. I was like, this is too cool of a concept to not at least go out and attempt it. So, yeah. And then my wife is crazy enough to support me.
Nice. Well, there is this common thing, and I've mentioned it in a few other podcasts, but it feels like all the successful entrepreneurs that I've interviewed on here have an incredibly supportive either spouse or some close support system.
Yeah.
I haven't interviewed anyone yet, and that might be an interesting story.
Totally.
But to see someone who did it in complete isolation, right? I mean, I think you need to have someone that's the shoulder to cry on, the one who's like, okay, you can't quit, you got it, you can keep doing this, and willing to go through the crazy with you, and risk a lot of stuff, the comfort and security. A lot of times, I mean, you guys sounded like you put all of your savings into the shop and put all of your savings then subsequently into the software company. Big risks both times, right?
Definitely.
So how did you think then about approaching this, like to get it going? You'd done the market research with the sperm, you'd done a lot of your own kind of questioning and stuff. But I actually want to ask you a question because I'd love your perspective on this. I've noticed that there's this interesting but and sometimes very painful gap between what people say they're going to do, especially in consumer, like when it's lots of individual consumer decisions. There's a gap between them saying like, oh, that's really cool, or oh, that sounds like a really brilliant idea, and then to them actually getting out their wallet and doing the thing or buying the thing, taking the action. And what's fascinating to me is in the beginning, I thought, oh, people are just lying to be nice. And how do you get past that? But then as I dug deeper in that and had more personal experience with that, I realized they're not lying. They genuinely think it's a cool idea. What's crazy is they're surprised by their own behavior in that gap between like, I think that's a really cool idea, but oh, now you want me to get out my wallet and pay for it. It's like, suddenly I feel weird or hesitant or I don't know, maybe I won't do that. I don't know. So it's not even like the people themselves don't know themselves well enough to know the difference between like, oh, I think I would do that, and like, oh, am I really going to do that? So how, with the Treads app and with the Treads company, like how did you start figuring that out? Like make that leap between people saying like, oh, that sounds like such a cool idea, and you're like, okay, give me your credit card.
Totally.
How did you start validating that?
So one of the first steps, and this was so in the early days, I spun up a landing page and designed the whole concept, what I wanted, kind of, the app screenshots to look like, all of that, and threw up a landing page. And, basically the landing page replicated a full sign-up process for the product. And, I kind of felt bad at the time because when they click on sign-up, they would start to fill out the form. And when they would hit next, it was a screen that basically said, hey, we'll let you know as soon as the product's available. So kind of like that initial beta list of people who are interested. So spun up the landing page and started running ads on social media, driving people to the landing page. And then it was just like, wow, okay, the metrics are looking pretty good on this. People are actually filling out the form and hitting next. And then I would reach out to those people, offer them, hey, I'll give you a $25 gift card if we can do it. Just a quick interview. Love to get your thoughts on like, what's interesting about this. So that was like real validation process for us.
Because, and I want to really make this distinction clear. It sounds like what was cool about what you did, even though some entrepreneurs might be a little hesitant, is like, oh, is that disingenuous? I would say no. I think that's really brilliant because you weren't starting with like, hey, could I just pick your brain about this idea? You set it up such that they thought they were going to go click to buy. Like they thought they were doing the thing. So you'd kind of replicated that, the psychological gap between like, oh, that sounds cool, and like I'm clicking next, which like is some form of commitment.
Exactly.
And then you're like, oh, okay, you're kind of on a waiting list now. And maybe 1 out of 100 are like, oh, that kind of sucks, like, or whatever. But even if they're kind of pissed, that might be a good thing because they wanted it so bad that they're mad that they can't immediately have it.
Totally.
And then you follow up with kind of the research thing, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of a brilliant way to try to get as close to the psychology of, are they really willing to buy? Are they really willing to get out their payment or do the thing? So you started validating, got this feedback, the metrics started looking really good. When you thought of the idea originally, because you kind of alluded to it a few minutes ago, was it just going to be tires, or was the idea like all car services, but we're going to start with one specific kind of spearhead?
Yeah, I mean, we were definitely honed in on tires. Like that was the initial concept.
And why tires out of all the like car service subscription type things?
It was really interesting because it was the product in the market that didn't really have much of a moat. Like a lot of the incumbents, like the only thing that people are doing to differentiate themselves is what kind of rebate, like manufacturer rebate can you get on buying a new set of tires, or hey, on this weekend only, buy 3 and get 1 free. And that was just like
kind of hard to differentiate, and everyone was doing the same thing, kind of.
So much noise. Just it was all noise when I was looking at it. I was just like, oh man, like we can totally upend this, completely change how consumers should approach it, starting off with the tires for their car. And it's literally the foundation of every vehicle, right? And it's overlooked. Most consumers are not, car enthusiasts. They're not mechanics. Most people don't ever want to worry about their tires. So how can we deliver the ultimate peace of mind, the ultimate convenience? And it's super expensive. So how do we lower the barrier of entry? And that was like really the problem. And so tires really became our entry point into the market.
Okay. So tires becomes the thing. Then how did you start thinking about where were you going to source these tires?
Yeah. So that was the weirdest thing, because look, I don't come from the auto industry. Right. Like in high school, I worked at an oil change place. So, I've changed oil and I knew a little bit about cars, but I'm not an industry veteran. So, kind of, it's just like doing back casting, building out a company. It's starting, okay, here's where I want to be, which is having a mobile app. You can manage everything about your car from it. And then it's just taking each step backwards into
simplifying it a little, kind of peeling it back to the most simple idea. So did you Google like tire manufacturers or
sellers, distributors?
Is that how you did it? You just started Googling and like, okay, I'm going to find, and then like cold outreach, like, hey, what if I want to buy some tires from you? Like, did they say, dude, I mean, you got to buy like 10,000 tires from us to even have a conversation? Or like, how did you like, hey, I'm a startup, I might just buy like 10 tires, or I guess 10 wouldn't be the number, but like 16 tires or 32 tires, or,
I mean, that's the funny thing is like, I'm like this total random dude calling up companies, right? Saying, hey, I want to, I'm starting this company. Here's what we're doing. And the moment you say tires and subscription, like people are just like, a lot of people are like, you kind of get the blank.
Like, what?
Yeah. What are you talking? What does that mean? But thankfully, one of our first national distribution partners got it right away.
Wow.
They were like, this is genius. This, like, if you can pull this off, this is going to be amazing. And they were full on supportive from day one.
Wow.
Opened up an account.
Did you say, do you want to invest?
There's always those conversations that happen for sure, but
okay. So do we want to give them a shout out? Do we want to say who they are? Or?
So our first major partner was Tire Hub.
Okay.
Which is actually owned by Goodyear and Bridgestone, so two of the largest tire manufacturers, right? So
they probably supply to a lot of the big like tire chain stores, right?
Yeah. Major distributor. But they've been a great partner for us from day one. So
how many tires did you have to buy with your first order?
Well, that's what's cool is the way that things are structured. Unless you're buying directly from a manufacturer, you're not buying like, truck loads or container shipments or anything like that. So it's ad hoc.
Wow.
So
they're like, okay,
yeah,
your first customer will drop ship them 4 tires or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the amazing thing.
That is cool because that made it so that you didn't have to come up with a huge pile of cash and have your own inventory or something, right? So you're just facilitating this transaction and it's getting shipped directly from the manufacturer.
Yeah. And even the way that we structured it, I mean, Treads we've really designed this experience to be peace of mind and convenience for consumers. So kind of the flow, you download the Treads app, you connect your car by plugging in your license plate, or if you have a smart car, you can use your same car app login credentials to sync that vehicle with the Treads app.
Wow.
Yeah.
So like an OAuth login with my Tesla login or whatever.
Tesla, Ford, whoever it is.
Okay.
And then that opens up a lot of telematic data, which is amazing, right? So you connect all your vehicles, you pick your subscription plan. So we have a couple plans. So you pick whatever fits your budget. And then you schedule the actual installation right there in the app. But we have a network of installation partners in all the major cities we work in. So you pick the day, the time, the location, and our install partner gets the tires. They bring them to your house, your work, wherever you are, and take care of the servicing on location. So again, convenience, peace of mind.
That's amazing.
Yes.
Okay, so that is cool, but we got to take a step back.
Okay. Yeah.
You're starting this, you're validating this, you get this partnership. Were you funding it yourself at that point? And how did you start thinking about, should I raise money?
Yeah.
Because I'm assuming, you had some money from Bookly, right? And you potentially could have just bootstrapped it or like self-funded it at least.
Yeah.
So when and how did you think about raising money? And what I want to hear is, what was it like pitching to investors this kind of a concept compared to like a SaaS, software platform?
Yeah, definitely night and day for sure on that front. And so in building out the MVP of the app, self-funded. My wife fully supported what we're about to the journey we were about to get on because she knew the journey. So self-funded that, and then shortly after the MVP was just about to go to production, I got connected with Mucker Capital. So they're a venture fund out of LA, Santa Monica. And they invited me to join Mucker Labs, which is their accelerator program. And I was just like, man, this is such a intriguing opportunity. And basically how that functioned is every single week, me and one of the partners, Will, and then also John, one of the investors, would have phone calls, and we would.
Was this a virtual lab
virtual.
Or whatever? You didn't go live in Santa Monica or?
Yeah, didn't have to go down there, so it was all virtual. But every week we would hop on these calls and rip apart the business up and down, and then we would go validate our ideas or what we thought of that previous week, and then the next week rip it apart.
Wow.
And it was just like this amazing process to go through in building a company.
Yeah.
And it was just so hands-on. Anyway, and part of that process, they obviously put in a tranche of capital as well to keep going.
Yeah.
And that was the genesis there. But
did any of your previous investors like Kickstart or any of those guys want to participate in Treads?
So once I, kind of got into the accelerator, really started getting some traction. It was at that point that, Kickstart, Royal Street, Park City Angels, thankfully, it was just like, obviously we had a great experience working together prior. So the second round was just like, man, it's so fun to go on a journey with them again.
Yeah.
So,
they knew you knew them.
yeah.
It's a lot easier to kind of like make that bet again because you
Yeah.
had success together, which was great.
Totally.
Okay, but Mucker Labs was kind of where it
That
started
was the origin.
for at least the first money and stuff that wasn't your money.
Yeah.
And it sounds like a really cool process. Like, let's just beat this thing up. Let's find all the reasons why it wouldn't work. And then let's fix those or address those. And you kind of just kept building.
Exactly.
And then at what point did you try to like bring on your very first customers?
Man, so it was like June of 21, the app went live. And then I think it was within 3 days, we had our first subscriber.
Wow.
Of the app going live.
Who was the first subscriber? We should shout them out by name. Do you know who it is?
So I believe...
Was it your brother-in-law?
It was actually a total stranger.
Nice.
Yeah. So the first city we launched in was Phoenix, Arizona.
Why?
So this was kind of like, there was still a lot of COVID restrictions, across the country. And Phoenix, Arizona in general, happened to be like one of the most lax cities or, states. So that was our first market. Kind of.
But why? I mean, if you're shipping the tires directly, was the concern or the awareness around COVID was because the installers couldn't like make face-to-face contact or something like that?
Yeah, it was really thinking of the service side of okay, how do we...
Because they're not going to a store. The tires are coming directly to them.
Yeah.
But there has to be someone that...
Some interaction.
Do the service, okay.
Yeah, exactly. So we felt like that would just make the easiest user experience given the circumstances.
Did you have a target demographic in mind? Were you targeting like older demographic compared to young, where, you're young, you're kind of, you're trying to save money, so you're like, I'm going to do it myself, or like I'm going to do my own thing, whereas maybe someone who's a little older has some finances and they're like, I don't really want to change my tires. Like, was that part of the strategy?
It was interesting because initially it was just like we had this thesis of, okay, it's probably going to be a younger demo because of it's an app, it's very tech forward. But as we got to market, it was very surprising that we were leaning actually older on the demo. Our oldest customer, I think, is like 77.
Wow.
Our youngest, I think, is like 18. So obviously a pretty wide spread. But really, our sweet spot is like 22 to 44.
Really?
Is like a sweet spot.
I mean, I get that from the tech perspective.
Yeah.
Although by now it feels like, even old dudes like me are kind of like, we're familiar with the tech. Yeah. And so it felt like to me that it would be an older demographic is like, I just don't want to change my own tires. I used to do all that. I don't want to do it anymore. Yeah. So that's interesting to hear that it's still a pretty young kind of median age group. That's interesting.
And I think it's just timing of everything. Like consumers are ready for a completely different experience, a different way of paying for a very expensive service. And there's especially, when the economy tightens up, it's like, how do you really like smooth out your expenses?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of other interesting things, like people are actually owning their cars for a lot longer. The average now is like 13 years.
Really? That's the average?
Yes.
Wow.
Across the country.
Wow.
And if you kind of look at that, I mean, you're going to replace like 4 or 5 sets of tires if you own a car for 13 years.
I need to tell my wife, it's 13 years, babe. That's how long. That's how long. She likes new cars. Yeah. So, okay, 13 years. We need to make it to 13.
Totally. Yeah. But, gosh, I mean, the other contrast, right, is your question earlier was, pitching Treads, B2C company to investors versus like Bookly, B2B. And, those are two different worlds, no doubt. And, you know, I think when you're talking about consumer, I don't know. So I think that there's definitely more scrutiny that gets put on a business when you're consumer facing or direct to consumer versus that B2C setting. So
because you have to replicate the full sales cycle 1,000 times more than with B2B, right? You get a customer and it represents a chunk of revenue or recurring revenue, another customer. But when it's a consumer, you got to have a lot of customers and repeat that, like marketing, close the sale, service, that whole process, just a way higher volume at a lot lower kind of price points, right?
Totally. And, definitely our focus has always been like improving consumer experience. But one thing that has happened organically over time is we found that Treads is really appealing to businesses too. So surprisingly,
like as a perk,
as like a fleet, like fleet.
Oh,
so there could be a small business, plumber, landscaper.
Any kind of delivery,
Amazon, flex delivery.
Interesting.
Gig drivers. The list goes on. And then even with like Turo, there's a lot of small businesses run on Turo. Like mini fleets of vehicles.
Yes.
So,
and funny enough, there's an insurance company in this building that also does Turo. So they've got like 10 cars out in the parking lot that people just come and
get them.
Yeah, come and get the cars and drive them and stuff. So they're kind of their side gig from their insurance company is like running a fleet of they've got at least like 10. So I guess we should make the introduction to you guys.
Totally.
So that's interesting. How did you start thinking about marketing this? And what was the what types of marketing things did you start to do, and what really started to work for you?
Yeah, I think a big thing that separates us from incumbents in the market is most of them are marketing through like Google AdWords, flyers in the mail. But again, it's all centered on these rebates, from the manufacturer. I mean, that's all they're doing is fighting each other of who has the best sale. What's really cool with Treads is we're actually more focused on getting downloads. We just want people to download our app, connect your car to it. It will help you track your mileage. There's other cool features in the app where you can scan your tread depth of your tire and understand if your tire needs to be replaced or what's the health of it. There's other cool features too, because again, most consumers are not mechanics, auto enthusiasts. Like if you get a nail in your tire, most people would look at it and not know if it could be fixed. Inside the Treads app, we've actually developed our own visual machine learning where you can take a picture of a damaged tire and it will tell you if that tire is repairable or if it needs to be replaced.
Wow.
Without even having a technician look at it.
Wow.
So we're putting kind of that trust.
The tread depth thing, that was really cool. We kind of glossed over that pretty fast. I want to double click on that because that seems really cool. I could take a picture of the tread. Now, I mean, I'm really fascinated by how accurate is that, because you're relying on the person to like have a good enough lighting, I guess, and or like the right angle that like the image is like shows the tread well enough for you guys to be able to do it.
Totally.
And does the user get immediate feedback like, oh, that picture sucked, you got to try it again? Or is it more like video and at some point it gets it? Or how does that even work?
Yeah, so it's really cool. So you open it up in the app and it's video. So it just enables the camera right on your phone, and you literally scan. There's a little progress bar on the screen, and you scan it from left to right. And it's scanning the tread depth. Once the scan finishes, it pings it, to the cloud, right? and then it returns a result of the actual scan. And the accuracy, this is like a super technical thing, but it's within 1/32 of a measurement.
Wow.
So extremely accurate. And if the scan's no good, it will kick back like, hey, sorry, retry your scan.
Wow.
But
so how did you guys start building that? I mean, that's AI.
Yeah.
Like a visual AI that's kind of analyzing, has a knowledge base of like thousands and thousands of images that you probably had to train it on and say, okay, these are good tires, these are bad tires. And so it knows like, yep, this one's not going to make it. Like that must have been a pretty technical process.
Yeah. In like most software companies, if you don't have to build things, you don't, right? So we actually teamed up with another company out of Europe called Anyline.
Wow.
And we basically embedded this SDK where this technology...
So they were already doing that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Super amazing. But the thing is, like, most of this technology is reserved for commercial application. It's not consumer facing. So we're the first tech company to be able to take this tech and make it
apply
consumer.
It towards consumer.
Exactly.
That's really cool.
Yeah. So it's just amazing that a consumer can validate all of this without feeling like they're just being sold a product.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like kind of the traditional sales techniques.
Right. So you have subscriptions.
Yeah.
And are there different types of vehicles that it works better with? I mean, are you focused on, hey, specifically it's like smart cars or EVs or any kind of car? I mean, how have you kind of positioned that in the marketplace?
Yeah.
And and I want to go back, like I still got to figure out like how did you start marketing this thing? Because I was so curious about that. So I don't want to skip that. So maybe answer how did you start marketing this thing? And then maybe a subsequent or tied into that, like who is your ideal audience? And it's a monthly subscription, multiple tiers, like different tiers of pricing for different types of vehicles, maybe, or walk us through all that.
Yeah. So
start with like how did you start selling this thing?
Totally. Yeah. Being a mobile app, we have a strategic advantage where it's like we're focused on downloads, and then we went straight to social media. Like we're not out competing with incumbents on Google trying to, advertise the best sell, right? Yeah. It's all about downloading the app, gaining access to the user experience.
Did you reach out to influencers? I mean, you didn't have a social presence yet.
Yeah.
So how did you start building that social awareness?
Yeah. Interestingly, it was like we've dabbled a little bit with influencers, but we found like, that's pretty cool for like content creation, but for user acquisition, it just wasn't quite getting the results that we were looking for. So we've just gotten really good at customer acquisition through really good ads on social media. And again, just driving downloads. And that's where it all starts.
Okay.
So
you're starting to do some paid social advertising.
Yeah.
Was there a particular platform that worked better for you guys than others? Was it Instagram? Was it TikTok? Where did you start?
Yeah. So we started on Facebook and Instagram.
Facebook.
Yeah. Yeah.
Going after those old fogies on Facebook.
There's still some young kids out there, maybe.
Okay, so you're on multiple platforms.
Yeah.
And did it start hitting right away, or did you have to tweak your messaging?
We definitely have. We're very honed in and focused on our digital ads, and we're constantly, on a weekly basis, we have a really good growth team, and we're honed in on just like what ads are working, what ads are not. And we're
running lots of experiments and just constantly.
So many. And then being a mobile app, there's other dynamics of some ads work better for Android and some are better on iOS. And so we're just constantly experimenting. It never ends. And, you try to ride the waves as long as you can before you have to hop the next wave.
Get another message queued up.
Yep.
So what would you say your official launch date, or when was that first customer? When did that happen?
It was like the last week of May in 21, I think, is when the first customer subscribed.
Okay.
So, and it was Steve in Phoenix.
Steve. Shout out to Steve in Phoenix. Steve, we love you. That's amazing. And is he still a customer?
Still a customer.
That is so cool.
Last I checked, he's still a customer.
That's so cool. Okay. And then it started to go, and you were hyper targeted on Phoenix for how long before you started to like just kind of open the floodgates?
Yeah, I think we ran probably like 3 months in Phoenix, and then we started to open up our next markets from there. And today we're in 22 major cities.
Wow.
And by the end of this month, we'll be in 32.
And the restriction on location is the or like the install crews, right? You got to partner with like the service crews that are on the street, and pretty local to where the sales are happening and stuff. Right?
Exactly. Okay. So the first few markets were the hardest, obviously, because we've had to build out our network from scratch. But now we work with everybody from the largest national brands that you can think of, all the way down to like smaller mom and pop businesses that might own 1 or 2 vans or 1 or 2 stores. So now our scalability with our national partners is just opened up, our roadmap of expansion.
How did you find and secure your first installation partners in Phoenix?
Google.
Just Google. And what were you searching for? Like just tire installation service or what?
Yeah, just like...
Because a lot of those are kind of associated with a local tire store.
Yeah,
so
totally.
Kind of your competitor, sort of.
Yeah.
But were there some that like, no, we just do service. We just do installations. How did that go?
So I think initially when we were building out the network, there's always this fear of cannibalism. Like, you guys are taking business. Why would we want to work together? And once they understood our business, where it's like, hey, we're not selling at retail. We have a completely different model, subscription-based. It's really, at that point, once we were able to convey to them the volume of service work, and they quickly realized, okay, I get to add to my top line revenue. I don't have to worry about customer acquisition, and I don't have to worry about customer service. I just have to do the work.
And is there a pretty good margin on the service part?
Yeah, I mean...
Enough that they're like, okay, that's an interesting opportunity for us.
Yeah, and part of that really comes into... It's a mixture of... It's always a balance of volume and margin, right? So the volume makes everybody pretty excited about what we're doing. So... and then from there, it's like any partnership. You build your rapport and goodwill, and before you know it, you're lock and step with great partners.
Nice.
So,
did you have just one to launch with in Phoenix? I mean, Greater Phoenix is a pretty big area.
Place, yeah.
So did you feel like you had to have like 3 or 4, or like how did you start?
We started with, I think, initially 2.
Okay.
And then we gravitated towards 1 just because of quality.
Wow. But then was that one like, that's like an hour and a half away?
Yeah. And then we, continued to expand from there. And, once you have a few anchor partners, it's
easier because you've got a model. You're like, hey, we're doing it with all these other guys. And then the flywheel gets going.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Yep. What was the next city after Phoenix?
We went to Austin, Texas.
Wow. So didn't you like just stay in Arizona? It was because you're going to hit the like major kind of metropolitan sort of areas and stuff.
Exactly.
Okay.
And Austin, every market's a little bit different, has its own challenges, geo, all of those dynamics play into it. But yeah, it's been...
So why not Salt Lake City? And when did you come to Salt Lake City?
So the complexity of launching in Salt Lake was winter.
Okay.
Thinking about snow tires.
Yeah.
So we hit all of our initial markets were warm weather.
Okay. Because the likelihood they're going to keep the same tires on for a long time.
Exactly.
Whereas here it's like we're switching tires every 6 months, basically. Okay.
Yeah, totally. And so that was just to kind of work out, all of the bugs, tune everything. And then eventually we did launch. We are live in Salt Lake and also Denver. Those are our two winter markets.
Nice. And is Park City... You live in Park City?
I do.
So is Park City kind of included in Salt Lake, or is Park City not really covered yet?
It is covered.
Okay.
Yeah. So
sort of out of Salt Lake City.
Yeah, we cover the Wasatch front and back.
Okay. So. And back. Yeah, gotta remember the back. I love it. Okay. I've got a couple more questions before we wrap up, but one is, so you've been going kind of officially for 3 years almost?
We're getting to 3.
Getting close to 3. Okay. Where do you go from here? Just expansion in the U.S. for sure.
Yeah.
But have you already started thinking about outside the U.S. and what does that look like?
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely a lot of other complexities, when you think about going outside the U.S. market. Mm-hmm. We're definitely, our first focus is Treads being live in every major city in the U.S.
How do you guys think about major?
So there's kind of
a specific population cutoff that you're kind of is a sweet spot?
We have a internal we call it our MBA strategy, right? It's basically any city that can support major sports teams.
Okay.
So that's kind of how our first filter is looking at it.
Okay.
But we have also started testing secondary markets. Mm-hmm. So an example, just outside of Phoenix, you have Tempe. Mm-hmm. So we're live in Tempe as well.
Okay.
You have Colorado Springs just outside of Denver. Mm-hmm. We're in Colorado Springs. So we are testing those secondary markets as we're really.
And I mean, it's Phoenix. I'm sure there's parts of like Mesa, Scottsdale, like greater Phoenix kind of stuff. It's all covered. Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
That's cool. So trying to get to all of the majors metropolitan areas in the U.S. and probably going to get a couple of offers to get bought before you like start to go international. But it's interesting to think like, hey, are there other areas where this model would really work? Yeah. And then from a features and functionality standpoint, we were talking before about like, if I wanted a subscription with you guys, do you guys swap my summer tires for my winter tires? Do you guys store the tires for me?
Yeah.
Like, talk to me about like, how do you think about improving the service and adding a lot of these kind of additional features?
Totally. Yeah. I mean, really how we're viewing it is, obviously we launched with the tire subscription. Mm-hmm. Since then, we've also rolled out an alignment subscription, an oil change subscription, wiper blade subscription.
Wow.
We are an insurance broker, so we have a full auto insurance marketplace.
What?
Yeah.
I did not know that. Okay.
And we just launched an extended warranty product inside the app.
Okay.
So as you can see from that approach, like we're looking at the anatomy of a vehicle and what are like the headaches that consumers deal with.
All the painful things related to car ownership.
Yeah.
After you buy it, how do you guys help me take care of my car?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just not worry about it.
All right. I didn't even know that you'd expanded into some of those other services, especially I didn't even know about the insurance thing.
Yeah.
That's super interesting.
It's really exciting.
So did you just find a partner to kind of underwrite those policies? I mean, you're not trying to be an insurance company or something.
No, not at all. So we have 40 of the major carriers. So we can cut quotes
like
from
almost anybody. Okay.
Yeah. And it's real time in the app.
Wow.
So it's all about the user experience. How do you take painful experiences that cause hassle in our everyday as consumers, and how do we solve it with technology?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool. Okay. So my last question is, would you ever think about giving customers equity in your business?
It's super interesting.
Okay.
The concept, right?
Yes, this is a shameless plug of Olson.
No. It's such a good one, because if you think about, at the end of the day, like what's core to every business, it's your customer, right? And everybody's always thinking, how do you make your customers as loyal as you can?
Mm-hmm.
How do you make your product as sticky as possible?
Mm-hmm.
So I think what you guys are building at Awesome is like, it's such a powerful, underutilized asset, right?
Yeah.
How do you give every customer a vested interest in the success
Mm-hmm.
of what you're doing?
Exactly.
So.
I didn't even pay him to say that, but now I'm going to have to pay to say that. That was so good. Yeah. I mean, we're obviously really excited about what we do, but I'm always curious to have these conversations with the consumer business brand owners that say, we think it's the next level of community engagement and customer engagement, and every brand forever. And I'm sure you've even thought about, like, all the way back to the skate shop, right? It's like, how do I get customers to be loyal, to return?
Totally.
Okay, do I have a punch card? Do I have my 10th visit free, and like try to use discounts, try to use other things to like keep them coming back?
Yeah.
Even exploring like subscription model. I don't know if back in the skate shop days, you're like, skateboard subscription, you can get a new set of wheels every 2 weeks.
We did have a punch card.
Okay, yeah. So like, it's like, who doesn't, right? Like, so everyone has the punch card idea. Yeah. And I think what we're trying to do is just take that to the next level where with a private company, it's never been possible before. We've unlocked this ability for them to give fractional amounts of equity. We're not talking about huge amounts of money.
Yeah.
But what's crazy, and we were kind of talking about this, is the response to it is kind of irrational. Yeah. We can't totally explain the psychology, but we're leaning into it very heavily. Yeah. And that is, when someone has a little piece of ownership of something, they're kind of irrationally loyal or evangelical or committed or whatever, right? Yeah. And that's what we're trying to do. And so it's cool that that you said it back better than like I could even say it. So yes, thank you for the advertisement there. We could talk more often.
Totally.
But so Zach, final thing is like, where do you like, what can the community do to help Treads? I mean, we're trying to just make people more aware of it, right? Yeah. And doing this podcast and cutting up some of the content that we'll post on social and stuff. But like, it's Treads.app in the app stores, Treads.app online.
Yeah.
And just go sign up for a subscription, right?
Yeah. Download the app, scan your tire tread depth, see if you need some new tires.
So is that a great first start? Is like you try to get people like, hey, just scan your treads and then we'll tell you where to go from here.
Yeah, totally. See if your tires are worn out. And that's probably a huge overlooked factor of car ownership is just the raw safety of your car. Yeah. Like you're putting your family in it, right? Or you're driving yourself in it.
Yeah.
And, just keep yourself and everybody around you safe.
So the tires was the initial entry point, but now with the other services, can someone sign up and not do the tires and just do some of the other services if they wanted to?
Yeah, totally. Okay. Yeah, if you scan your tires, you're not ready for them yet.
Okay.
You can still sign up.
Hey, how about oil changes or
wipers?
Yeah.
All those things you don't want to take the time out to go do.
Oh, that's awesome.
We'll do it for you.
Okay. That's so cool. Zach, thanks for being on. This has been really, really cool. Yeah. And I'm excited to see like the total world domination of Treads. This is cool.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.